Just- Oh, we're recording now, but just put the baby down for the nap, so we should be Gucci for the whole 90.
But AJ, we want to see them.
Yeah, but it's being recorded and I don't trust their head
Yeah,
movement
yeah,
to not have their face on there. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
I'm one of those weird parents about the faces on the internet. Jordan has met my child in person, though, if anyone wants to feel really jealous.
So jealous.
Well, I mean, we're gonna meet them in Milan, no, so that's fine.
That's true. That's true. Oh man. So it's 12:01. We can go ahead and get started because it's recording and if people are really into the material, we can go ahead. I moderate a little differently. You should have everyone's bio, so I don't want to waste time doing that because I feel like the substantive conversation is way cooler than our individual accolades that people can just Google. So yeah, I am AJ Link. I'm a black dude in a red hat. I will slow down for the interpreter. I have a beard and I'm wearing a black shirt. I am the Space Law and Policy Chair at Black In Astro, and something that I feel is really important is we talk about non-STEM stuff in space. And so I got some of my favorite people in the space community. Some of them have STEM backgrounds, but they do non-STEM things, which, multidisciplinary work is cool. And today I just want to talk about space humanities, space art, space law, space ethics, space governance, um, all the things that kind of get erased when we talk about rocket launches and satellites and all the shit that, quite frankly, I don't care about because space is, to me, majestic and magical and the most amazing relationship humanity's ever had with something off Earth, even though we're in space. So I'll stop rambling and talking. We're at 2 minutes in. So I have Divya, who is amazing. I have Saba, who is amazing. Jordan, who is amazing. Kamal, who is amazing. And Rue, who is amazing. I just did that in the order I seen, not my favorites, because they're collectively my favorites. If y'all want to give any background when you answer the first question, feel free. But if not, we can just jump right in. And my first question for y'all is why are humanities often overshadowed in space conversations? I know that's kind of a broad question, but kind of why do you think that oftentimes when we hear about space, it's so STEM focused? And I'll go in reverse order. So, Rue, you can go first.
Hi, everyone. Let me start by saying it's an absolute pleasure to be here and to support all of my good friends. Today, we'd like to start by touching on why humanities is important for space, but I'll also go into a bit of my background in space law and policy, which stems from a deep interest in how legal and regulatory frameworks shape our exploration and use of space. This field combines elements of international law, ethics, and policymaking, ensuring that space activities are conducted responsibly and equitably. My interest was obviously sparked by the realization that space is not just a scientific frontier, but also a domain with profound legal and ethical implications. So, why are humanities often overshadowed in space conversations? I feel they are frequently overshadowed in space due to the dominant focus on STEM, and this would be your science, technology, engineering, and mathematics disciplines. These fields are seen as essential for the technical and practical aspects of space exploration, but this emphasis tends to marginalize the contributions of the humanities, which offer critical insights into the ethical, cultural, and historical context of space exploration. Additionally, funding and public interest are often directed more towards the tangible achievements in STEM rather than the more abstract contributions of the humanities. And with that, I'll hand over.
Thank you, Rue. Kamal, why do you feel that the humanities are often overlooked or left out when we're doing space conversations?
Thank you, AJ. I think one of the reasons why we feel that humanities are often overshadowed in space conversations is because I think that there's this assumption that everything of value in the humanities has already been mined and used during the space race to get all sectors of the US economy and academia to invest in the United States victory in that space race. I work with cultural heritage, so that's both intangible and tangible aspects of culture. And the aspiration to go to the stars is one that's shared by many different cultures. But when we have kind of imperial or hegemonic powers, kind of the into the collective aspirations of people who are not necessarily sovereign, often get subsumed underneath that. So when you take something like the Soviet Union, um, in Ukraine currently, there is a cosmonaut museum. I'm not exactly sure if it was destroyed during Russia's full scale invasion, but the Ukrainian people have their own relationship with space and with science. And despite Soviet domination, they wanted to carve out their own complex and unique identity. And I think that that's worth exploring. We see the kind of during the space race, the bipolar kind of race between two countries, but those countries contain multitudes of identities that have their own various and unique and important relationships with space and space exploration. So I think the humanities offers an important kind of lens through which we can look at the importance of culture in shaping not just scientific inquiry, but also artistic and cultural expression.
Thank you, Kamal. I really appreciate that. Jordan.
Hey, grateful to be here. I think some of the reasons humanities are often discounted in conversations around space is just about what captures attention and what people have been exposed to. I think most people have never considered the idea of a space ethicist or a space lawyer. They're not really sure where the humanities would be able to fit into the progress in this field. So I think it really just has to do with what people have seen and been led down the road of thinking about.
Thank you. So Saba and Divya, y'all have slightly different perspectives of people with STEM backgrounds. So from your perspectives and your experiences, why do you think humanities are often left out of the conversations based on like your relationship to the space industry?
Yeah, so I have an engineering background, and I used to be one of those people, right, who think of science and engineering as the most exciting thing ever. And I think part of it is also in certain cultures and certain communities, they also value, STEM education over other types of education. So I always gravitated towards that. And I would say I've seen this kind of pattern in the space industry in general as well, right? Like we'll focus on what an exciting rocket launch, but we don't even think about the implications of that launch on other aspects of our society. So I think it's a very deeply ingrained idea that when people think about quote unquote progress, right, that it's scientific advancements or technological advancements without thinking of the implications of those. And I think what I've noticed as well, especially coming from a STEM background, is a lot of scientists and engineers like to they're convinced that science is apolitical, that I'm doing science. I don't, I have nothing to do with these other things that you're talking about. But for me, understanding that everything we're doing is inherently political is what led to this shift of not looking at just we're developing a nice rocket and that's it, like that's driving humanity forward. So looking at all the other aspects that connect together. And I think part of that is really having an interdisciplinary or kind of a systems approach to everything. So not looking at just technology and science as if it exists in a bubble, because it impacts other fields, but it's also deeply impacted by other fields as well. So it's all connected.
Thank you, Saba and Divya. Thank you so much for being patient. I feel like you as a person, like you are known for your non-STEM stuff, but you do it in a way that connects your work. So I'm really interested to hear your answer.
Sure, yeah. So my background is planetary geology. So a lot of what I do is looking at like satellite data of the surfaces of planets. And a lot of the heritage of geology in particular comes from basically like in the Victorian era, the 19th century, starting in, really the 18th century, the people who pioneered geology, and right now I'm in the UK, and the UK boasts, we invented modern geology. It was these basically nobility, these lords who had free time because they had no jobs, because they were just incredibly wealthy, and they would go adventuring in the colonies. So my background is I'm Guyanese, and this was a country that geologists, these nobility would go exploring in the Amazon, and that's how like geology was born. And also other fields like ecology and biology. So this is something I think about a lot, because if I look into, say, like the geology of Guyana, the people who have written about the geology of the Caribbean were these people from these perspectives. And a lot of the ways we've dissected the hard sciences to the natural sciences from humanities and social science has come from this time period where there was this expansion of what science meant to the West, and it was very tied to like expansionist ideology. And a lot of it had to do with like putting scientists, because they were already on this pedestal. They were already like the rich nobility of Britain and France and the Netherlands. And this idea that scientists were just removed from society. They were doing this like noble, divine work that came out of a lot of like philosophies at that time. And so it was kind of in tandem with like division of labor as well. So like as factory systems were starting to develop and people started to, instead of like building a product all in one place, like by an artisan, you had people like working on factory lines. And the idea was that knowledge was also meant to work this way. And so a lot of people, even though like naturalism was very much about like society as well as ecology and biology, the sciences started to like just fully sort of dissociate from social science and humanities. And this is something that we see in geology, where like this was part of that process quite early on. And I think there are a lot of legacies of that now, where say in the space community and the geology community, it's very discouraged to talk about like the human element of things. And this is like a really visible split, because in geology, on the other side of geology is geography, which are people who actually do care about like integrating natural science with the human factors of things and the cultural and the historical. But I think we have like this holdover from this period of time where science was just like this extractive like project that had to just fill its own like sole role within like the bigger machinery of like wealth generation in the colonies and such. Yeah.
Thank y'all all so much for your answers. And I just think, Kamal, when you talked about you feel like people feel like everything's been mined. It's like, for me, the reason I love space is because there's an opportunity to create so much more and to be so much more than our limited perspectives have given us so far. And Divya, as you were talking, I was thinking about something that was like, I don't know, a special interest of mine, maybe, but telling people that, the whole idea of the Renaissance is just propaganda, right? Like there was no just great change, and like people decided that life was different. Like people intentionally separated out social sciences, soft science, whatever you want to call them, and humanities from, quote unquote hard sciences. But then we celebrate, the Renaissance for all these multi-talented people who were doing interdisciplinary things. And I think it's so frustrating as someone who's grown up in the US and kind of Western societies and Western knowledge spheres, of thinking like there are so many other ways to learn and collect knowledge beyond just hard STEM stuff. And you were talking about the difference between geology and geography, and something that for me just really pisses me off and annoys me is when people are like, the moon is a dead rock, or like it's just rocks out there. And I was like, oh my God, the moon is the longest relationship we've had as human beings. Like it's guided our people to exist. Like when people had nothing else and it was dark, the moon gave them light and gave them hope. And you say it's just a dead rock to be extracted. Oh, it's one of the things that just completely pisses me off. I will stop rambling. But how do the humanities guide your relationship to space, the space community? in the space industry? I know I didn't answer the first question, but I'm a moderator, so I won't. But this question to me is like, humanities are the reason I love space. Like I already talked about this. They're the reason like I know all of y'all and have relationships with all of y'all. Uh, and so for me, I don't know if I would be as in love with the idea of space if I was not able to bring a non-STEM oriented lens and perspective to it and share that with other people. Like for me, like I would go do something else probably. So I will not do an order this time. Y'all can just kind of free flow because I like chaos. So whoever wants to go first and talk about how the humanities guide your relationship to space and people in it and the space industry as a whole.
Okay, I can go so we don't have to have the few seconds of awkwardness. So I think my relationship with space has obviously evolved a lot because I did come from a very technical background, and I even used to say like my goal in this industry is to eventually send a robot to space because I did robotics in my undergrad. I was, obsessed with the science and technology, and I think there's two elements that really shifted the way that I see space, but also space industry. The first was the accessibility. So the fact that I was born in Jordan, I didn't have until in 2018 when I got my Canadian citizenship is really when I was able to get access to certain opportunities in space. So I always saw the space industry as this kind of very exclusive, very political industry. But then when you speak to people who are already in it, they're like, oh no, but it's apolitical. We're doing this for all humankind. And that phrase really gets on my nerves a lot because like who are you including in humankind, right? Like it's a very narrow view of what we're doing in the space industry. And the second was when I started to realize how connected the space industry is to the military industrial complex, because it is the space and defense industry by definition, because of the dual use technologies and the way that we use these technologies that we develop. So that was something that kind of I guess I started becoming a bit disillusioned with what I thought was really cool and started thinking more about, well, what is the actual impact that we're having, right? Like, if I send a robot to space, is that really going to help humanity, or is it just like, oh, I did something cool, right? So, um, I think those kind of realizations, it wasn't like a switch that just flipped and I was like, okay, now I'm going to do this, because I still had these deeply ingrained, beliefs that if I don't do something really technical, and I think part of it is also this idea of like women in STEM being, unique, and they are in some cases, but I feel that a lot of my identity kind of centered around this. I'm a woman in STEM. I need to do something technical for my work to be valuable. Um, but then I just kind of got over it. I don't know how. I think it was just being kind of like, okay, I don't really care, what people say about my work. I care about the impact of my work. And that's when I started kind of, moving away from the technical side. I founded the Jordan Space Research Initiative, which bridges space and sustainability, but the goal really is to provide more opportunities to people who don't have access to space right now. And then more recently, the Palestine Space Institute, because as a Palestinian, I was feeling very conflicted and also silenced in the space industry when you try to point out these connections that we have to, like the genocide in Gaza or what's been happening in many places around the world in terms of the impact of the technology, the industry that we're a part of. Um, People just don't want to talk about that, or they're scared to talk about it. Or if they do, they end up taking your article down because they get some backlash. Um, and so I think it's for me that I by prioritizing, this element of what are the ethical aspects of what we're doing, what is the real impact that we're having, regardless of how, successful or attractive it may sound, and getting over this whole, as you said in the first question, right? Like the things that we're working on are overshadowed by the technical progress. So that is a thing that you're kind of putting aside to focus on something else. But I think it's part of this internal, like, what do I care about? What do I want to prioritize? Who are the people who I feel, share these same values? And so it really guides, everything that I do in terms of the projects that I choose to work on, the people that I choose to work with. Even if it is a technical project, I want to work with someone who shares these same values. And I'll stop there because I've been rambling for a while.
Thank you so much. Also, we have plenty of time. So, if you have something to get off, go ahead and get it. And I really appreciate that, Saba. I know something for me that's really difficult is knowing where the opportunities are and who the opportunities are with, especially as someone who tries to get his students jobs doing space law. A lot of the companies that are the best place for them to work aren't actually great places. And it's like, I have a conflict of, should I even share this opportunity with them? Like, am I wrong for giving them the opportunity to choose for themselves? And I feel really conflicted. And I don't know, I don't have a good answer to that, but I just wanted to let you know that I feel that tension so much all the time. I don't know if anyone else wants to go and talk about how the humanities guide your relationship to space. Y'all are so polite, please.
I'll go ahead.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So I certainly resonate with everything that's been mentioned so far. I think this is where we can introduce the topic of intersectionalities and the differences in experiences across regions. So perhaps in developed regions or where the industries are much more developed, you begin to see how having a critical analytical view is really important, because then you can iron out certain issues relating to, for instance, representation, ethnicity and racial diversity, access and participation, and whatnot. But what more when it comes to emerging space nations that are yet to confront this, that are yet to develop strategic positions or even address existing socio-political tensions within the region? It becomes an exceedingly complex endeavor. And one thing I really struggle to accept, and it's a rhetoric that's always said in the space industry, is we're a truly global industry. Space unites people. We're united. It's all for the common heritage of humankind. But to what extent does the knowledge and technology that is gained from space actually trickle down to the most remote of individuals? And we're looking here, for example, at Africa, which is already in a very vulnerable position socioeconomically. I'll touch on a very difficult topic, which is the utilization of resources in Africa. And we understand that certain resources like cobalt and so many others are so critical to space systems, technologies, and electronics, and they come from the heartbeat of Africa. But who's to say that the technology that's generated from those minerals will be able to directly impact the lives of the communities from where they're taken from? So I really often struggle to wrap my head around space, even still as a concept for developing nations, simply because I've not seen as yet a concerted effort to not only support emerging countries, whether through collaboration or the laws, but to implement even existing initiatives. I'll go here to a little bit of the law and discuss the preparatory works of the treaties. Preparatory works are essentially the interpretation of treaty frameworks. So they give us a better understanding or idea of what the drafters were thinking with each provision. So they give us our thoughts, and from there, you see it reiterated many times, especially in the Outer Space Treaty, that space, of course, it's for the common heritage of all humankind, but it should especially be in the interests of developing and emerging regions. But do we see this in practice? Hardly not. But going back to the question, incorporating the humanities more fully, it allows us to have more diverse perspectives, because imagine all of the brilliant people in Africa that are yet to be capacitated. It only delays that development chain. But if we do the opposite, we can enrich the ethical decision-making, we can foster cross-cultural understanding, which I love that we're doing here today, and we can promote a more inclusive vision of space exploration. And this exclusion can lead to a narrow focus on technical achievements at the expense of considering the social, ethical, and cultural dimensions of all industrial activity, but especially space activity. For instance, neglecting the humanities might result in insufficient attention to the environmental impact of space missions, for example, the potential for geopolitical conflicts, or the societal implications of space colonizations. I'll touch on a few statistics and figures to bolster my argument, but going back to a couple of key factors that the humanities can help us reflect on. Consider representation. Yes, I'll begin actually with the outer space as the common heritage of humankind, and I'll summarize. The concept of outer space as a common heritage for all is noble, yet current realities show significant disparities in accessibility and representation, which is influenced by the lack of diversity within the sector. And I think we've reiterated this a couple of times already. With regards to representation, space exploration has historically been male-dominated, with women comprising only 20% of the international space industry and 11% of astronauts. This gender disparity limits opportunities for women and other underrepresented groups in STEM fields. I'll look at the penultimate one, which is ethnicity and racial diversity. And I'm looking here at the US context because, again, we don't have a case study to draw from, but we look at the US and other jurisdictions for guidance. Ethnic minorities face significant barriers in the space industry. For instance, in the US, and apologies, I don't have the latest figures, but as of 2020 or from 2020, only 5.5% of new tech hires were Black. NASA's difficulty in hiring Black and brown astronauts highlights the broader issue of underrepresentation and the need for diversity to foster innovation. Loads of other critical thinking points we could look at. Sab already mentioned access and participation. We could also look at inclusive policies and practices. Global collaboration is great and education outreach is much needed. But there are also some more difficult topics, again, that we shy away from in the industry. And that is, for instance, what is the impact of the colonization of space, that intersection of militarization and capitalism? Can we propose a decolonial model for spacefaring that allows for innovation? Are current approaches to spacefaring winning, seeing as we've relied on them so long? And where does indigenous wisdom and modern spacefaring come in? So I'll conclude at that. But again, just to reiterate the point that humanities helps us have a holistic view. And going back to what my colleagues have already said, everything is all connected.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rue. I think we're going to talk about this in the next question, but it's just like the idea of, is it even possible to have a really innovative and creative industry that isn't driven by the military industrial complex and its relationship to space? Because that's all space has ever been. We'll talk about this in the next question, like I said, but yeah, I don't know if anyone else wants to talk about their relationship to space and how the humanities guides that. Oh, come on, I see you on mute.
Thank you. For me, I see space as a potential venue for conflict, and that's conflict between nations, but then there's also the conflict of ideas. Like you mentioned, you being upset that the moon is referred to as a dead rock because of its great cultural significance to many different peoples. And when we look at things like cultures that have moon rocks that they find the significance of, and disputes over ownership and disputes of how we treat things that come from heavenly bodies, both in their physical significance for scientific inquiry, but also their immense intangible cultural value. Those conflicts will continue to crop up, and we have to find ways to address them. And the humanities may provide some sources that we can go to look to see how we can kind of resolve these different aspects of heavenly bodies and how we can all relate to one another. But on the broader front of space as a place for future conflict, there's always this tension between, is space a place for peaceful exploration, or, do we have to look at things realistically, that space will be weaponized? And how do we address weaponization? Is this something that we think about in the abstract, or do we actually prepare for it? It is part of that military industrial complex, but it's also something that is very difficult to ignore. And when we look at like, for example, Israel's war on Hamas, we have now what is confirmed to be the first kind of interception of a missile from outer space. The Houthis launched a missile on October 31st. That was, I think it made it to the Kármán line before one of the Israeli Arrow 2 or Arrow 3 missile defense systems intercepted it. And so, like, now we have to really seriously consider the implications of space combat and how do we prepare for that. But beyond just the kind of space as a conflict venue, how do we engage with the space community? And because the community is so varied, I think the humanities provide an invaluable insight into how interconnected different forms of knowledge and knowledge making are. Different disciplines can discover problems independently, but develop solutions collectively and apply them to space, both with terrestrial implications, but then also for extraterrestrial implications as well, for things like food insecurity. Like, how do we grow food more efficiently in drought conditions, which will help us to understand perhaps how we can support and sustain human life as we begin to have more permanent missions where we are in space for longer periods of time. And there are countries that do see problems in an interdisciplinary way, that look at the humanities, including ancient sources, and they bring different groups together to find value in those things. And they kind of create a lot of dynamic solutions by not excluding the humanities or excluding, you know, older sources, because they see that those things have value. When you look at like the movie Hidden Figures, right? Like, mathematics from periods long ago, that there are things of value, that even things that we may already be aware of, but may require a second look to really truly see the fullness and what they can offer for solving modern problems. And with regard to like my relationship with the space industry, I really think of ethics when I think of the space industry, particularly the ethics surrounding the labor of vulnerable people. So, like, when we were in high school, we may have read the book or heard of the book The Jungle by Upton Sinclair, that was written in 1905. And that exposed the horrors of slaughterhouses, how unsanitary they were, how people were exploited. The jungle really opened Americans' eyes to the essentially the people who were preparing the meat that they would eat at their dinner table, and how they were so ruthlessly exploited by the meat packing industry. The jungle was sympathetic to European immigrants, but it was very racist and unsympathetic to African American laborers at a time of intense racism and oppression, and indifference to their plight by many facets of organized labor. But The Jungle was such an eye-opening book that it did eventually lead the government to initiate reforms to protect the food safety of communities. And what I would like to think, with so many Black and brown people that prepare things for the space industry, such as the Latinas that will work in the microchip manufacturing industry, that would power many of these devices used in space exploration. We really need to look to see if the industry and the component or constituent industries in the space industry are treating those people who provide the labor, and those with that in the countries that provide the resources, whether those people are being treated fairly. Because it is going to be critical that we treat each other better, to not kind of recreate colonial paradigms of exploitation, and to do a lot better in creating a more equitable and sustainable, frankly, system that could guide us to the stars.
Thank you, Kamal. Divya or Jordan?
I think, well, for me, I'm a lawyer, and I came to the space sector through the law. So humanities is how I engage in the space sector. I really love what you said, AJ, about the offensiveness of the idea, and Kamal mentioned this as well, of the idea that the moon is a dead rock, and the horror of the idea that the people who think that way might be the people who are right now in charge of the way things are going to develop in this next phase of humanity's future as a spacefaring species. I think STEM gives us the what and the how of things, whereas humanities empower us to consider the why. And that why question is of paramount importance. We need historical analysis and cultural analysis, ethical analysis, and we need people who are informed by those analyses to create the guardrails that allow the STEM folks to continue to create tools that can help humanity as a whole, and not allow them to just create the tools that are going to help the richest people in the world, who are the ones who are currently funding this research. I also think it's important to note, as we talk about humanities, the broad scope of what that is. Star Trek is the humanities. The humanities are what guide and inspire us. A lot of the people who are the hardest tech people and who are really focused on that may not even realize that they were guided also by the humanities. And so I think the humanities really guides all of our engagement with space. And for us, the people who are kind of adjacent to the dominant society, I think we have to make sure that we are the ones who are demanding that these questions be asked, because if those questions are ignored and the movement forward is reckless or is entirely capital focused without regard for the harms that could potentially occur, it's our people who are going to bear the brunt of the resultant suffering. So the onus is really on us to ensure that the perspective that the humanities can bring to the development of the space sector is really lifted to a paramount role, and not a afterthought.
Yeah, I appreciate you calling out, Jordan, that for a lot of people, the arts, media, the humanities are how they decide to fall in love with space, right? For some people are like, oh man, I'm really interested in jet propulsion, and like that's their thing. But usually it's seeing something that is space adjacent, whether it's space art, a drawing, a picture, right? Like um Earthrise, the photographer, the astronaut that took that picture just died, right? Like there are really famous pictures. I think about the pale blue dot and how like that's arguably the most important piece of media in my life, right? To just center me and ground me whenever I'm doing work, to realize like it's all really fucking fragile. And I think noting Kamal, how like a lot of people always talk about and pitch space as like this great future, and there's this term called space washing, right? Like they're saying space is all great, but I really appreciate how you're realistic in that like space is causing harm right now, right? People will pitch it as defensive work, like you talked about the defensive missiles, but they're also aggressive or missiles or attack missiles, right? There are people who are using space technology to genocide people on this planet, right? Like the bombs in Gaza that people are finding have US Space Corporation's names on them, right? Like it says Boeing on the missiles, right? I know that the Palestine Space Institute has this amazing database that shows all of that, but I think it's really important, Kamal, and I think it's helpful for me because sometimes I dream of a better future, but there's real shit going on right now, and like we have to combat that right now with the real seriousness. And I'll stop talking, Divya, so you can make your point.
No. I think that leads into my point of I think for me, coming from the space science background, the biggest role that humanities has had to me is the concept of materialism. This is an idea of basically what Kamal has described, of like looking at the reality in front of you, and also historically in terms of like the relationships and dynamics of whatever system you're looking at. So as space scientists, we don't think of the material. And I'll describe a little what I mean. When we get data down from satellites or rovers, for example, we do advanced analysis with these. I work with images, doing advanced analysis with images and mapping, and but we don't think about, for example, who manufactures the camera. Who launched that spacecraft, who manufactured that spacecraft, who mined the materials, those, you know, rare earth materials likely mined in places like the Congo, to enable us to do that study, who developed the types of software and what is the primary use of that software, which is usually military uses. And it's kind of like that soup to nuts like connection that I think is really important to highlight in anything that we do, whatever science it is we do, because that leads us directly to the ethics of what we're doing, or the cultural context. Who are we erasing from doing this? Who's not present in the labor force, or who's being exploited in the labor force? So what got me thinking about that first was I was extremely lucky. I interned at NASA in high school. And when I had my senior year left of high school to do, and I wanted to make like all my assignments about space because I was so obsessed. And there was one assignment that I was doing for a history course about like how do you predict nations will change in the future? And I was thinking about you know, I wonder how this relates to space. And so I started doing some Googling, and it actually led me, you know, I was a Tumblr girly. I was reading about like colonialism, whatever, on Tumblr, and white supremacy, and, you know, educating myself online a lot. And this led me down a rabbit hole, and I found this, it was a book and also a publication, a paper about the Guyana Space Center. So I mentioned that I'm Guyanese, so my family's from the country Guyana, but this the Guyana Space Center is in French Guyana. This is a small country in the north of South America, but it's also part of the Caribbean, and it is not independent. It did not get its independence with a lot of the rest of the Caribbean in the 1960s. And the Guyana Space Center was built by European space powers. It is still used as a launch facility, the primary launch facility for space missions by Europe. So for example, the James Webb Space Telescope was launched there. But for decades, there have been protests by the people of French Guyana, who are primarily Afro-Caribbean, Afro-Indigenous as well. And basically against this emblem of colonial power, of so there's a famous thinker from Guyana named Walter Rodney who described how Africa is deliberately underdeveloped, right? It's not naturally underdeveloped. European powers actively did that, and he extends that to the Caribbean. And it was this resistance to the system where people, I don't remember the exact quote, but she was saying, one of the protesters was saying, they can launch these advanced technologies into space, they can go to the moon, but we still don't have like electricity infrastructure in the country. And it was also an issue because this launch center was built on one of the main highways through the country. So as we know, those of us who follow rocket launches, these often end with explosions. There are lots of tests. And so people are really worried, what if there's an accident? What if there's an explosion during one of these tests and we just lose access to this road? How do we get to our jobs? How do we, you know, function as a society? And the most recent incident of this was in 2017. There was a general strike in French Guyana against the French government. And they were demanding, I believe it was 1.2 billion euros in infrastructure investment in French Guyana. So things like roads and electricity, et cetera. And one of the sites that they occupied was Guyana Space Center. And I think that's really, really important to point out because it was the symbol of you use our land to do this thing. It's a very attractive, you know, tourist spot. People love going to, you know, this exotic location in the Caribbean and enjoying the Caribbean Sea and you know, the Amazon rainforest, whatever, but there's like no investment in the people there. And they won that strike. They got a commitment from the president of France for the 1.2 billion euros. And so this is something I read like at the beginning of my career, and it totally changed my relationship to space. And I'm really lucky that that happened. But as I did my undergraduate degree, it was in parallel to multiple, you know, attacks by Israel on Palestine. There were, you know, incidences of police brutality, and I was thinking about like how our technology relates to all of this. And there was an incident when I interned at a particular space agency where I had an issue when I spoke out about this, when I said, is it okay that like the same companies that build our amazing spacecraft that give me my data are also arming the US government in bombing Syria, for example, or the Israeli government in bombing Palestine. And it always connected me back to, French Guiana is my neighbor, right? And if you go back a few centuries, like countries like Afghanistan are also my homeland. So it's this kind of like personal thing, but I didn't have the vocabulary to describe it until I started talking to people like social scientists and people in the humanities. And that's something that I think is really important because there are a lot of people, we experience life outside of science, right? And I think a lot of us don't have the knowledge or the access to like put words to these things, how these things actually connect to our lives. So I always think about like, if I had been born or had been from French Guiana because of a slightly different history that I had, what would be my relationship to space right now? Would I be so privileged in the relationship that I have? And so I found that extremely important as like a really formative experience, and have been lucky to meet amazing people working in the space humanities who've given me like a lot of clarity to understand these relationships and the history of this. So I think like it goes back to AJ, what you were saying, like that tension. Like I don't have the answers to these major problems, but I think it's that tension, and the more we talk about that tension that we experience, and the more we feel it, I think is really important, and something that we need other people in STEM to experience, because that is like our humanity calling to us, right? Repeatedly, when we feel conflicted, when we feel confused about what is the right thing to do, what is the most ethical thing to do, is it possible to do this? And I think like the question is almost the point, because it draws us together. That's not really much of an answer at the end, but those are my thoughts.
I I think those are great thoughts. And your point about the question, one of the questions that I love asking people is, should we even go to space? Should we even launch things, right? And that's a question that a lot of people, especially inside the industry, don't like to hear. But like, why are we doing this? What's the purpose? Should we even be doing it, right? Are we actually benefiting humanity and society, or are a few people getting really rich off of it and, launching satellites that can surveil the world and be a world police? The last question you have prepared, and then I think we'll have time for some Q&A. I know there's Q&A in the thing already, is what do you think the broader space community misses out on by not being more inclusive of the humanities? I would change that. I know I wrote the question, but I would change that to be actively hostile towards the humanities. I know that we've talked a lot about how military or state militaries use space, but like there's things like Operation Paperclip, which is now history. So I will put this in the humanities category, but like there are a ton of people who don't know that the reason the US has the space program that it does is because it excused Nazis and their crimes in order to build rockets for the United States to go to space, right? Like a huge part of the United States space dominance is built on the work of known and admitted Nazis who the United States excused, right? And that is something that to me impacts our entire space legacy, right? I own NASA swag, but NASA employed Nazis, right? We were talking about that conflict. So like what is the community missing out on by like not acknowledging this history as part of, histories and humanities, but like currently ignoring all the voices saying like, hey, this shit is kind of fucked up and we need to have a serious conversation about who we are as people, as collective humanity, and if we should even do this space thing. So I know that's kind of a broad question and something that, I struggle with every day as kind of the work that I do, but I don't know who wants to take that.
I'll go. Sorry, and I kind of mixed up the questions there, but they're interlinked, so I'll loop my way back. But yes, in terms of what I do personally, and in terms of incorporating humanities into my work and how it benefits me, is again going back to the critical analysis, being able to develop your own sense of ethical frameworks, getting a deeper understanding of historical perspectives and also cultural contexts. So I pretty much say that what we're missing on is developing a broader view of the implications of space exploration on society and environment. And I'll go again back to space law and policy, which is deeply rooted in the humanities. I think all laws are, as Jordan mentioned, and how it helps us to address the governance of space activities and ensure that they are conducted responsibly and equitably. But these are very interesting buzzwords and very easy buzzwords to say, but how conscious are we of our hidden biases? And I think this is how I loop back into the question at hand. And that is, having a humanities background really helps us to be more cognizant of our inherent biases. And I'll pause here and reflect and say another thing I like about humanities is how you can discover a sense of self, a sense of how you like things done, a sense of how you respond to different stimulus, a sense of how your community does the same. And one of those interesting things that you can also develop through the humanities is deciphering your working methodology or the working methodologies of different groups of people. And certainly what happens when, these different methodologies clash. But I'm a didactic learner. I think I learn very practically. I would like to share a practical example that perhaps can help us, and this is a take-home exercise, if you will, can help us uncover insights into unconscious biases, stereotypes, and prejudices. And I'm going to refer you to Project Implicit. And basically, they have a number of hidden bias tests, which again reveal insights on your biases, if you have any. But here's a summarized analysis of what they find. And I think we can translate this even to the space industry and help us or use it to help us develop a more holistic view of the space industry. So the first thing that we have to confront, and I think these are all painful realities, is firstly, unconscious biases are pervasive. They really permeate through our society. And I think what makes them so deadly is just in the conception of the phrase alone, unconscious, is very likely you might not even be aware of these biases. And I think that's the first challenge, which is why it's a very mature exercise, even just to take this test or to be challenged on the basis of these values and see how willing are you to stand up for causes or what you believe is right. So despite commitments to egalitarian principles, most people still harbor hidden biases that influence their perceptions and actions. And I'm afraid to say that we do see this in the space industry at present, especially with the continued focus on commercialization and innovation, I think, over societal growth and collaboration as a whole. The second realization you'll have is, again, once you realize that these biases are pervasive and unconscious, you then begin to question what are their origins and how do they get reinforced. And these biases often originate from, first of all, early experiences. One interesting fact is most of our character development that will carry us through the rest of our lives are actually determined in a very fundamental learning development period. So from 0 to 6 years is when the human is at their most vulnerable and malleable, and a lot of who you are stems from the experiences in just those few formative years. So again, you have to start looking at what are the societal norms, what are the media portrayals, and how do they persist even against contradictory evidence? And how can we make it relevant to space, especially in regions where so many strata of society are still yet to develop? So space is already a far-off concept. The third thing you might realize when you do a deep introspection is that these biases have an impact on behavior and discrimination. So these hidden biases affect behavior in various contexts, leading to discrimination, of course, and unequal treatment, whether that's in education and employment or social interactions. But what's important here is the humanities gives you that opportunity to recognize the impact of biases on behavior. And it stresses the importance of empathy, social justice, and ethical considerations. So again, we should approach everything with a heart for people. I know that innovation, science, technology, and everything are the order of the day, but we still have to have that sense of humanness, I think we find even in the Outer Space Treaty provisions. I'll summarize the last two, but still equally as important. We see again, still there's a huge disparity between public opinion and discrimination. And this means that despite all the movement, the efforts, and the progress towards eliminating bias, we still find, and this I'll attest to the facts that I shared before, we still find that there's a huge gap between societal ideals and reality. And we need to explore why this dissonance occurs. And then lastly, I think this is the most difficult one, and I think this is where most often even decision makers may stumble, is how do we address the biases? Quite simply, I think education, community involvement, and conscious efforts are the order of the day. But even more so, engaging in critical dialogue, empathetic understanding, and moral reasoning should really be the backbone. So once again, just a call to action. If you'd like to find out more about your own hidden biases or the topic in general, please check out Project Implicit. They have a couple of tests you can take. But essentially, it just underscores the complexity of human behavior, and maybe that can help us have a more critical view of space.
Thank you, Rue. I don't know if anyone else wants to talk about it. We have about 30 minutes left and we've got questions in the chat, but kind of what is the broader space community missing out on by being so obstinate or aggressive towards the humanities? I don't know if anyone else wanted to share.
I'll go next. I think that by being so dismissive of the humanities, I think that the broader space community misses out on engaging with narratives that come from lesser known voices and actors. For example, by not engaging with the humanities, they miss out on valuable information that could come from the oral histories of the Navajo women weavers who actually worked on the Apollo mission or several Apollo mission circuit boards and core memories. That's a lesser known story of minority women in space exploration, but the cultural tradition of Navajo women weavers, they were able to be integrated into the development of these circuit boards, which is very difficult and very delicate work. But this cultural practice that they had was perfect for this very new application for space exploration. So they're unsung heroines. And by engaging with their stories, there's a lot more that we could learn and a lot more that perhaps, we could create opportunities for that next generation of Navajo women weavers or an analog that could provide an important skill for what we need for future space exploration. I'd also say that they're kind of missing out on kind of exploring the effects that conflict has on humanity and the implication that conflict in space may have. So AJ, you had mentioned Operation Paperclip. And I think I remember reading somewhere that like the German V2 rockets supposedly came somewhere near the Kármán line, but there's this another story from that period, another kind of threat from above that's lesser known, that if they engage with biography, they might understand a bit more about. During World War II, there was a secret mission that several African American paratroopers, pioneering paratroopers of the 555 Battalion, they actually did fire suppression and bomb disposal missions because the Japanese had launched about 9,000 incendiary bombs. About 300 of them reached America. There unfortunately were some lives that were claimed. They made several hundred jumps and they fought dozens of fires and disposed of dozens of bombs that the Japanese sent. Their work was vital. And they had to maintain this focus all while dealing with the incredibly harsh discrimination and racism at the military at that time. Though they were, elite soldiers, they had to unfortunately bear those psychological and burdens. But just kind of the intensity of their work and the stakes were so high by Lieutenant Colonel Bradley Biggs of the 555, the Triple Nickels, wrote a book about his experiences. And so if, the space community doesn't engage with biographies of people like Lieutenant Colonel Biggs, they won't understand that this kind of vigilance, this kind of fortitude that the Triple Nickels had showed, to study kind of how you prepare people for these kind of missions in forests where anything could go wrong at any moment. There's a lot that can be learned because space, there's isolation, there's alienation, there are high pressure situations that require a lot of innovation, a lot of creative thinking or critical thinking at a moment, at a split moment's notice. And I think there's a lot that we can learn, that the industry can learn by engaging, with biography. And it makes me think of the movie The Hurt Locker. Like Jordan had mentioned, like media. The Hurt Locker was about a bomb disposal unit in Iraq. And it was a critically acclaimed film. And I think part of the reason why it was so critically acclaimed was in its accuracy about the human condition and the human conditions within high pressure, high intensity situations where there is a lot of, alienation and isolation. And so, there's a lot that can be learned about how perhaps we can better like deal or help integrate with people who have served in those types of roles, to prepare, future people who are going in space to deal with those types of missions. And then mentioning the Arrow system that intercepted the Houthi missile back on October 31st of last year. As this war continues to go on, you'll still have people that will have to, the Arrow operators will still have to contend with the threat posed by Houthi ballistic missiles. This was apparently one of the longest ballistic missile trips that has ever been recorded. So, these concepts of, we have these people who are going to serve important roles, defensive roles in particular. How do we learn how space-based conflict will affect them, even though we're in a terrestrial setting, by engaging with the humanities through biography and other things that are more person focused? I think there's a lot that could be learned by the space industry. And like I said, with the early example of Navajo women weavers, oral histories for the work that's already been done that can lead to future innovation. And not just future innovation, but also recognition for the diverse work that has gone into space exploration.
Thank you, Kamal. I don't know if Jordan or Divya or Saba have anything they'd like to say. Jordan's unmuted. Divya's unmuted. Everyone's unmuted. Go ahead.
Oh, just quickly, I don't know how we define the broader space community, but I think that it's important to consider that maybe they don't lose anything. Maybe they actually get what it is that they want, which is the ability to just move forward unfettered, extract as much benefit as possible, and go off into the sunset. And so it may be the case that conscious folks or folks who are thinking about these things have to muscle their way in, because maybe the broader space community doesn't actually have an interest in incorporating our perspectives. If the question is what does humanity lose? I think humanity loses the potential for a long-term sustainable future as a spacefaring species, because if it happens in this sort of way that is so reminiscent of colonialism and imperialism and the ethoses that led into those frameworks, it's not going to be sustainable. There's going to be so much conflict, and it's just not, it doesn't have, it's not well fated if it goes down that road. And so yeah, humanity's future as a spacefaring species, I think, is what we stand to lose if the humanities are not incorporated into the field.
Thank you, Jordan, Saba, or Divya.
I think Jordan said covered it. I think it'll just be more of the same, right? And that's a lot of what Jordan said of it's just continuing on the same path. And even if we look at, so for example, like initiatives about diversifying the space workforce, for example. This is something that a lot of space scientists of certain demographics, meaning, white space scientists want to just like do this without any engagement of humanities, as well as without engagement of the actual people they're trying to bring into the field. And I'm preaching to the choir here, but I think this is a serial problem, for example, of people just saying like, oh, we'll just encourage people to apply to this, and they won't actually expand what that means. They won't actually look critically at like the workplace culture or cultural sensitivity, or how they actually relate to indigenous communities. So for example, with the 30-meter telescope, University of Hawaii is in conflict with Native Hawaiians because they're building on a sacred Hawaiian site. And the university solution has been, oh, we'll just do outreach. And that's not like an actual engagement with the history and the cultural context and so on, but they say, and that will diversify the space workforce and repair our relationship with this indigenous community. And that's not how you do that. But it goes back to what Jordan was saying, is that is entirely in their self-interest. They're perfectly happy not engaging in any sort of a sensitive way because they want to build their telescope, regardless of who it hurts. And so, yeah, just echoing the point that Jordan made of can humanity actually do that and be spacefaring? No, I don't think so. Yeah.
That's such a good point, Divya and Saba. I will let you talk. And someone has a hand raised and there's tons of questions. But I think your point about kind of just outreach or diversifying, I know this is Black Space Week hosted by Black and Astro. But we have to note that not all skin folk are kinfolk. And just because we have people who have similar appearances to us in high places in the same destructive systems does not mean we are going to get free or dismantle them. I'm happy that our panel is beautiful and diverse in terms of their appearance, but united in their struggle to make space better. And so I think that's something that gets lost when we do events like this, when we have conversations like this, is kind of like just putting someone in a position of power isn't necessarily going to affect change the way that we want, if we want to change or dismantle. Like those are two different things, right? So I think that's a really good point about how outreach isn't enough. The diversity initiatives without any substantive changes in practice isn't enough. And I'll stop talking so Saba can talk.
I really resonate with really all of the points you're all making. I wrote a few bullet points to share, and as every person was answering, you were covering one of them. So that's really amazing to see. I think it's important to keep in mind that, for I think at least for the people on this panel and people interested in this topic, what draws us to space is this idea of creating a better future and doing it for humanity, right? As Jordan was saying, I don't think actually the industry itself would be impacted by not including perspectives like this. I think it's humanity that loses out in the end. And I think that this idea of creating a better future isn't something that just happens automatically, right? Like it has to be a conscious effort that we're really thinking about the way that we're going about space exploration. And so one of the points I wanted to really stress on this question in particular is this idea of epistemic injustice. So whose knowledge systems do we value? What knowledge are we valuing? And who are we excluding from the conversation? One of the examples that I think came up earlier, also related to this idea of the moon as a dead rock, when the Navajo Nation opposed sending the human remains to the moon, and it was kind of brushed off as, these are just religious reasons and we can't care about everyone's religion. And that was really like things that people were actually saying to excuse, not taking into account what the Navajo Nation was flagging as a problem. And I think, when 80% of the world's biodiversity is safeguarded by indigenous people, maybe you should listen to them, right? Like it's not just I think it goes back to this idea of also what kind of diversity are you valuing? And I mentioned earlier this thing of women in STEM being seen as groundbreaking, and it relates to AJ's point. I actually wrote a quote, Black faces in high places are not going to save us. This was from a professor in the US, Rua Benjamin, who was talking, kind of linking this also back to the genocide in Gaza. And I see this also with, just because you have a woman on your board, just because you have a Black person on your board, even if you have, a Palestinian or an Arab person, that does not necessarily absolve you of taking the necessary steps to ensure that the work you're doing is ethical, right? And I think it links back to this idea of space washing, which we talk a lot about in the Palestine Space Institute, that these companies that really the grand majority of their work and their revenue is from military applications. Like over 80% of the money that they're making is coming from selling missiles to Israel or other oppressive regimes, and reinforcing police brutality and all of these things that I personally do not want to create a future where we're just propagating these same things into space. But then they use their handful of space activities to be like, well, we're creating a better future. So again, it goes back to, how are you defining better future, and how are you defining humankind, and who are you including? Who's driving this conversation, not just being included, right? So I also wanted to give a few personal examples. When Divya mentioned the launch port in French Guiana, I remember when I did my internship at ESA, the European Space Agency, back in 2020. We were having a conversation about this, and kind of similar to what Divya was saying, like this is like the lens through which I see the world. So I'm always kind of bringing up these uncomfortable topics, and everyone around me was European. And I remember saying something like, "Oh, but this is like it's literally a colony that exists today. That you're like, why are you so excited about this spaceport when it's colonization in action?" And they were saying that, oh, but it's not a colony, it's a French department. Like, what? I don't care what like word you use to describe it, right? Like, it's still effectively it's the same thing. And when we're talking about, Palestine and all these connections that we're bringing up today, the general sentiment is like, well, you know, one of them explicitly said like, oh, if we were all European here, we would be on the same page. As like you shouldn't be contributing to this conversation because you don't agree with us. And that's a huge part of the problem, right? Like if you just want everyone around you to agree with you, um, what kind of future are you building? And I think I was saying earlier, for me, it wasn't like an instant switch that changed the way that I see the space industry. It's kind of a collection of these moments, which eventually culminated in me deciding to quit my space job in the Netherlands when we were working on a satellite, and actually a constellation of satellites, and they wouldn't tell us what they were for, which already is a huge red flag, right? Because you don't know the technology that you're working on, how it's going to be applied, who it's going to affect. And through digging around, I found out something related to defense, which is such a broad, vague term that is super subjective as well. And then one of the managers eventually said something like, oh, it's fine, they're just going to use it to monitor illegal fishing. And I think that the example I brought up in that moment was, well, like fishermen in Gaza are not allowed to fish because it's illegal, and they actually get shot at and killed for trying to, just live in the environment, the small space that they're afforded on their own land. So just because something is, illegal, doesn't actually make it wrong. And I love that AJ also, as a lawyer, says this all the time, that the law is just a way to maintain these same power structures and systems. And unless we're really trying to change the way that we interact with the world, like just saying something is against the law, like, okay, who defined the law, right? Who's upholding it? How are we translating it into space, especially, given what we're talking about today? So I think all of these things kind of, it's just there are so many different perspectives that we are overlooking, that we're discounting, in favor of really, most of the time it's just economic gain and power. Like when they talk about what we're going to do in space, a lot of the time it's just for commercial gain, and just taking, this kind of capitalist, extractivist worldview into space, which goes against really what I think a lot of people find fascinating about space is the opportunity to create something better and to have a better future. So the last thing I wanted to mention, yesterday I attended a talk where someone described, these topics that we're talking about today as space shaming. And I just thought that was so, like, that is so out of touch that you think if someone says, oh, this rocket caused environmental impact, oh no, they're shaming space, like, we need to do something about this. Maybe try to be more ethical, maybe actually ask them why they're saying these things, right? Like, maybe you can find a better way to do it. So I think this kind of, the space shaming versus the space washing and this interplay that we have it's really so important to involve more people to understand, why are we shaming you? We're not shaming, we're part of this industry as well, right? Like we have a vested interest in making it better. So it's not like us versus them, or it is, but it shouldn't be, in my opinion. And yeah, I think the last point is that it also drives people away. And I see this, I mean, I'm experiencing this right now personally as I'm looking for, what am I going to do after my PhD? And I'm actively avoiding, companies or organizations that are complicit in the genocide in Gaza or that have a huge military aspect of their business, because I don't want to be put in these situations. And to be honest, not much is left. Like if you filter those companies out, those organizations, you're not left with a place that would welcome people who think like us, who are critical of the current status quo in the space industry. And if that's all we have, what we're creating is just this dystopian future where we just have wars in space and slavery in space and all of the bad things that happened here on Earth, and we're just taking them up there with us. And so, when AJ asks, like, should we even go to space? If that's the future that we're creating, absolutely not. I love the idea of going to space. I've dedicated so much of my life to, pursuing this and to helping guide the space industry in a way. But if this is how we're going to do it, then who really stands to gain from that?
Thank y'all so much. We have 12 minutes. There's a hand raise. We're gonna do the hand raise, and then we're gonna try to get through the ones in the Q&A if we can. I don't think I control who allows the people to speak, so whoever controls that, please.
Can can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, this is Jarita Holbrook. Do I need to introduce myself?
You do not unless you want to.
Okay. So I'm at University of Edinburgh and Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics in Science, Technology, and Innovation Studies and Astrophysics. So I just wanted to comment on some of the things that other people have said. I've shared the stage with you guys, some of you guys previously, but when you said that the answer was outreach for the TMT situation, I was on the floor laughing because astrophysicists and scientists suffer from a huge lack of imagination, and they think the answer to everything is outreach. And I'm like, you guys, not everything can be solved by outreach. But so you've already cottoned on to that. You understand that they have a lack of imagination. I wanted to speak about the implicit test, and what happens when people take it. They would rather discredit the test than admit that they have the biases, right? They'll say, oh, I took this, but it said that I was biased against such and such. The test must be wrong, right? So it's not really, in a lot of cases, shifting the needle at all, because they would rather discredit the test than actually admit that they have those biases. So just like doing interdisciplinary research with a lot of people from different fields, being inclusive is hard and it's time consuming, right? So, and in some cases, if you're of a majority person and you don't feel like there's any inherent value in being inclusive, then they find that it's a waste of their time and it's exhausting. So, um, things move a lot slower when you're inclusive, and people should be prepared for that. They should be prepared for listening to people and seriously considering different ideas. After all, that's why you brought people to the table. And you guys mentioned a lot about values, right? Who gets valued, whose ideas get valued. Um, and I think I heard people say the same thing that I think about, which is who actually gets to set the agenda, right? And definitely, Saba, you were talking about something that made a note about, which is that a lot of times when they want to be inclusive, they don't want to be inclusive. They want to actually have people agree with them, right? So the goal is not for true inclusivity, where you listen to diverse voices and rethink your agendas and co-create and all those lovely things, but instead to just get people who think like you, who happen to be different flavors. And you were saying that AJ, that skin folks aren't necessarily kin folks. And my favorite analogy to that is the axe in the forest, right? That the forest kept voting for the axe because the handle was made of wood, right? I love that one. So that's all that I wanted to bring to the table. It's mostly just agreeing with you, but hopefully adding a little wrinkle, like something a little that you haven't thought about yet. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Truly appreciate that. Panelists, if you want to go through and answer some of the questions in the chat, like there's a question, how did you guys discover your passion for space? I lived in a place with not a ton of light pollution. There was some, but not a lot. And I could look up at the night sky, and that shit is amazing if you ever have the opportunity to go to a place with no light pollution, which is exceedingly rare these days. But if you can find a dark sky park, yeah, you should just look at it and be in awe of the universe. I have a question about space ethics. What should scientists do to include a sense of ethical practices in their work? In this case, space scientists. I'm not a space scientist, so I can't answer that one. Uh, there is a lot of resonance with this conversation. Thank you. While STEM and humanities will continue to be a debate, it seems there's widespread agreement of reaping the benefit from the space economy, projected to be 1.1 trillion US dollars by 2040. Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, 2017 is that site among spacefaring nations. For the panel, what do each of you think the role of the space economy with a humanities lens ought to be concerning the space sectors on planet, e.g., remote sensing or space tourism, or insurance, off planet, e.g., space mining or space debris, space exploration, e.g., new moon race or space colonization, and infrastructure, e.g., space workforce or space traffic management? That is a hell of a question. Um, I don't know if I have the capacity to answer that in 7 minutes. That's like a whole paper almost. Saba has a hand raised for that one.
Yeah, just very briefly, I wanted to say, so from the perspective of Jordan, and the reason I decided to focus on sustainability and space, is because this idea that, space exploration is inherently valuable and it's going to be good for the economy is also not true, globally, right? So for a country like Jordan that has limited financial resources, limited natural resources, saying invest in space makes absolutely zero sense to them. So you have to be able to really look. I think part of the question was, which part of the space industry, right? So again, it goes back to the benefits for life on Earth. So the on planet, how are we using space infrastructure? Like I don't like when people say, space is good for the environment just as this like blanket statement. Um, because we have Earth observation satellites, we know a bit more about the climate, so it's inherently like it has solved all our problems. And it goes back to the point about accessibility. So who has access to this data? Who knows what to do with it, right? So um, that's part of the reason I shifted also way more from the engineering and science part to how do we actually apply all of the knowledge that we get from space? What are we doing with it? Who has access to it? So that's the focus of my PhD research and why I'm working on, for example, in Jordan, looking at specifically what are the national priorities? What are the goals that they need to focus on inherently, regardless of whether or not space exploration exists? What are the things the challenges that they have in the country? Because then you can be like, okay, well, we have this specific satellite that can provide A, B, and C, and that's what you can do with this data, and that's how it can help with, your action plan. So I think the key here is being really specific to the situation, to the country, to their economy, because it's not, yeah, it doesn't apply to everyone when you say space is going to be a huge economy. Most of that is going to be like in the United States and Europe. So how do we actually bring that to make it actually global?
Thank you so much, Saba. Another one is, I think they're being answered. One that isn't is, I wish we had more conversations like this in STEM. How can we continue this combo after Black Space Week? So the thing that I do, as someone who gets invited to a ton of space events and conferences and all that, is I always ask the question, why aren't you talking about the humanities? There was a Black Space Week event the other day, and I asked the question, why aren't we talking about the humanities when we talk about making sure that people have access to these futures, right? When we talk about what students and kids are presented with as options for career paths or passions or hobbies or whatever, why aren't we saying, like, you could be someone who helps craft or uncrafts laws, um, that help people in space? You could be the person who examines the sociological impacts of some countries getting to go to space and have billionaires fly up on joyrides, and some people struggling to have food or getting access to satellite internet and it destroying their communities, which is a story that just happened, right? Like, there are all types of opportunities to explore the social impacts of space or to critique space. And you should always bring that up, why no one's talking about that, instead of talking about all the cool shit people can build. I don't know if anyone else wants to answer that question. People are
I think
responding. Oh, go
this
ahead.
is something I responded to a similar question about how do we bring this, or like how do we continue to think about this as space scientists? And I think it's similar to what you've said, AJ, like keep bringing it up. And also when you have things like, I don't know if you're, in grad school, bring it up to your journal clubs, like start looking into literature like outside of your sphere, because there's a lot of people have wrote, AJ supplied this in the Q&A, but like Reclaiming Space is a book. There are a few like books and resources that aren't like too technical that are really good introductions to a lot of these issues. And I'm going to highlight the Space Ethics Library, which is put out, I think it's by the Ethics and Human Rights Group at SGAC. And it's like extremely comprehensive and goes into a lot of different details about like space law, space ethics, different aspects of the space humanities. And I think like talking about it is like really, really key. Like find someone and just like start talking to them about this. So like, did you know this? Or even if it's just your friends, and integrating that and like normalizing the conversations in like a STEM sphere, even if it's just like your group or the people that you see every day, is extremely impactful, and can lead you so many different places. And I speak from experience that that's how I started. You just start building these networks of people who care about these things, and you meet rad people like AJ who then connects you to more people and doing really cool initiatives. And yeah, that's my advice.
Yeah, we have 1 minute left. I'm gonna say we're probably gonna go over. Saba, go ahead.
Okay, I just very quickly want to give a shout out to the Palestine Space Institute webinars that Divya has been organizing. I left a link in response to that question if you want to join. Like they're closed, very small webinars, invite only to keep it within the community, but a lot of these topics are covered and I've also learned a lot from them. So yeah, I definitely recommend that you join.
Amazing. This is AJ. We are at 90 minutes. Appreciate all of you for coming and sharing your knowledges. I know and from all of you all the time. Appreciate you. Thank you for everyone who joined us and anyone who's watching the recording, because I know I say I'm going to watch recordings, but then I don't. So if you watch this, appreciate you. And yeah, thank you everyone for coming. And yeah, just be more human as you do your space stuff. Love y'all and Black Space Week for sure.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.